Welcome to your refresher training on road and electrical safety. We will start the session with a message from our senior leaders in Nokia on our life-saving rules and non-negotiables. At the end of this session, we will have to answer a few questions directly related to this training to complete the training package. Nokia's life-saving rules were introduced in 2015. These are 6 simple rules that we know will save lives. Following the life-saving rules will make sure that everybody goes home safely at the end of the day. Our life-saving rules are: always wear a seatbelt in any vehicle. Do not drive distracted or tired. Always drive at a safe speed for road, traffic and weather conditions. Always attach yourself and your equipment when working at height. Always make sure that no one enters the space below when you're working at height. Do not work live. Do not work on any electrical system unless you're trained to do so. The 4 life-saving rules that we're going to focus on in the refresher training session are the 3 rules related to road safety and the 1 that is related to electrical safety. We will give you examples of each of these during this session. In 2021, Nokia's leadership team re-emphasised our requirement to follow the rules to all our employees and our suppliers. There's a link below that you can access Nokia's leadership team's video. Nokia's life-saving rules are non-negotiable. There's a zero tolerance for people who do not follow the life-saving rules. It's important to emphasise that everyone has the right to refuse to do something that they believe is not safe. Follow the life-saving rules or stop work and speak out. Our life-saving rules, Nokia's essentials and the non-negotiables are all interlinked. We will continue to say this throughout the training session. Nokia wants everyone to go home safely at the end of the day. Everyone. Our employees, our suppliers who deliver the services for us, and our customers. Our essentials define Nokia. There are 3 essentials: open, fearless, and empowered. We're open to the idea that someone may see a better way of doing something. We expect everyone to be fearless when it comes to raising safety concerns, and we will support anyone's right to refuse to do something that they believe is dangerous. And finally, everyone is empowered to do the right thing. With this comes the duty to intervene if you see someone working or behaving in an unsafe manner. As our leader stated in 2021, and we've emphasised, our life-saving rules and essentials are non-negotiable. So what do we mean when we say road safety? Road safety is one of the major risks that we face when working for Nokia or on behalf of Nokia. We can split it into 3 components: the driver, the vehicle itself, and the journey. This refresher training will discuss each of these 3 areas separately. Importantly, we will also discuss with you Nokia's non-negotiables for each of these areas. So, let's concentrate on the non-negotiables for each of these areas. For the driver of the vehicle, he or she must have a valid driving licence, must be medically fit to drive, must have additional training where this is required. Examples of this could be defensive driver training or for the use of a trailer. Must not drive for more than 8 hours on any day. The driver must ensure that only authorised people are in the vehicle. Must never use a handheld mobile phone whilst driving, and must always drive at a speed that is safe for the road conditions. This does not mean that the driver can drive at the maximum speed limit. The road conditions may well make this dangerous. For the vehicle, it must be suitable for the intended use. A good example of this is you would not use a Nissan car in the rural areas of Africa or Latin America. It must be maintained. It must have regular and documented checks. All seats must be fitted by the manufacturer. An example where this has not been complied with is with the fitting of a bench seat in the back of a van. Each seat that is used must have a 3-point seatbelt fitted. Headrests must be fitted in all seats. And finally, there must be a fixed segregation between the passenger compartment and the load carrying area. For the journey, regular breaks must be taken. High-risk roads, regions or areas must be considered, as well as the weather, the traffic conditions, or the time of the day. All the areas that we have just discussed and that are on this slide are Nokia's non-negotiables. Controls must be in place to manage this. What is journey management? We covered this briefly in the last slide and what the non-negotiables are when it comes to journey management. What we're going to do now is focus on journey management, as this is often misunderstood and is just as important as the driver and the vehicle. We are often asked, when do you need to manage the journey? Not every journey needs to be managed. Most single, short journeys, where the time is taken, the distance driven, the road conditions and the basic rules of the road are known and complied with, will not require a journey management plan. So, how do you decide which journeys need to be managed? Some examples where this will need to be done are travel to remote customer sites, or travel to and between multiple customer sites, or travel in remote areas with changeable or unpredictable weather, or travel that may be affected by other activities, for example, climbing towers. Other areas that must be considered are the time that's taken to complete the journey, the distance travelled, the time of the day and any known events, for example, religious holidays, festivals or roadworks, the road type and the potential traffic conditions, the weather, physical security requirements, or the number of hours worked in previous days. These are all areas that must be considered and controlled when you consider journey management. How can we make our journeys safer? The 3 life-saving rules are clear controls that will help in managing safety. However, these are not going to control all the risks. Our localised road safety procedures have clear rules in place about what is and isn't allowed. A combination of our life-saving rules and implementation of all our non-negotiables will manage the risk. Let's look at some examples of the types of rules that can be put in place. When we look at the time taken to complete a journey, drivers should not routinely drive more than 8 hours in any one day. For the distance travelled, drivers must take at least a 15-minute break after every 2 hours of driving and have a total of 45 minutes of rest every 4 hours of driving. We must ensure that only authorised people travel in vehicles that are being used in Nokia business. We have seen some incidents where friends and families have been in the vehicle. This must not happen. The final area that we need to concentrate on is fatigue. Once a driver becomes tired, they will not be alert. They will make mistakes. This can and has resulted in serious incidents. If you're in a vehicle and you see a driver has become tired, when it's safe to stop, do so. Stop, take a rest, and only continue when you and the driver are confident they have adequately rested and it is safe now to continue the journey. We will look at 2 examples that will show how the teams in Nokia in 2 countries considered and implemented effective controls to manage journeys. In KSA, the journeys that the teams make are very long. The roads are across deserts, and the desert road does not change from kilometre to kilometre. They can often be driving on these long straight roads for hours. The distance between the Nokia warehouse and the sites is often many hundreds of kilometres apart. With all of these conditions, tiredness can easily set in. What controls did the team consider? The team looked at the location of the warehouses, which could be relocated to shorten the distance travelled. Looked at where the teams were based to see if they could better utilise the teams and reduce the number of kilometres they were travelling. This could mean reassigning some of the work to other teams. They also considered the use of additional drivers and what would their role be. They took into account that if the relief driver also worked at height, did this increase the risk somewhere else? And when would they swap over the driving? This had the potential that costs may increase. This was discussed. The team put in an effective journey management plan to control the risk. Another example is driving in challenging conditions to keep the network operating. In India, the need to react quickly to an outage and also manage the challenges of other road users where the rules of the road are not always followed creates significant problems. The team looked at this and put in controls to deal with the problems. Nokia and our partners cannot control the actions of others. We cannot control how someone else drives. What we can do is put in solutions that are directly under our control. The teams considered all the outages that came through and focused on the critical outages. For the non-critical outages, it was discussed with the customer, and it was agreed that these could be rescheduled to a safer time. In other words, no driving at night. For the critical outages, the team asked themselves the following questions. Can overnight accommodation be provided? Should there be defined routes where this is considered? Should there be an approval process? If there's an approval process, who should sign it off? Should a local driver be used, one that still meets all of Nokia's non-negotiables? Should there be some areas or incident hotspots that are placed out of bounds at night? And finally, are there any defined emergency procedures in place? After discussing all of these, the team came up with some simple rules. Driving between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. requires customer and project manager approval. Fixing outages at night must be done by the team closest to the problem. Before starting, a discussion with the team must take place to make sure that the route agreed upon is the best option. For emergencies, all drivers must carry a fully charged mobile phone. And finally, if any overnight stay is required, the driver must call the supervisor to confirm that they have got to their accommodation safely. All of these ensure that the teams have managed the risk. We will now look at some instances where not everyone went home safely at the end of the day. In this real-life incident, which occurred at Nokia, a team were completing drive test trials over 2 days. The driver had worked over 16 hours in day one and then slept in his car. It was raining and he got very little sleep. In the morning, he started the driving testing again and fell asleep whilst driving. He lost control of the vehicle and left the road and hit 2 people that were walking along the pavement, and then he drove into a shop. The 2 people that he hit lost their lives. He drove whilst tired, a breach of one of Nokia's life-saving rules. He had driven for 16 hours, a breach of Nokia's non-negotiables. The effective implementation of Nokia's life-saving rules and non-negotiables would have prevented this incident. This incident is similar to the last one. The driver of the vehicle had very little sleep. He had less than 2 hours before starting his new shift, and he fell asleep whilst he was driving and ran into the rear of a parked lorry. He was travelling faster than the speed limit. He was speeding. The driver was wearing a seatbelt and he survived. However, the 2 other people in the vehicle at the time of the incident were not wearing seatbelts. They were not able to, as the vehicle did not have seatbelts fitted in all seats. This was a clear breach of Nokia's non-negotiables. The 2 passengers were seriously injured. One person tragically lost his life, while the other was critically injured. 2 of Nokia's life-saving rules were broken. Do not drive distracted or tired. Always drive at a safe speed for the road, traffic and weather conditions. In addition, there were several breaches of Nokia's non-negotiables, most important being that the vehicle did not have 3-point seat belts fitted. The Nokia team have ensured that all vehicles used in Nokia Business now meet the non-negotiables and the life-saving rules are followed. We have discussed the life-saving rules and Nokia's non-negotiables that relate to road safety. We're now going to focus on another key area where we must manage the risk. That is electrical safety. When we're working at height, you can see that if you fall, you will be hurt. If you drive whilst you're tired or distracted, you know you risk falling asleep and crashing. When working with electricity, we don't always initially see the hazards, but that does not mean that there is none. It means that we must understand the risk and put in the correct controls to manage it. When can we be exposed to electrical hazards? There are 2 distinct areas where we can be exposed to electrical hazards. When we are intentionally working with electrical systems or equipment, or when we are completing other work that brings us into proximity, contact with electrical systems or equipment unintentionally. Let's look at the first one, when someone is intentionally working with electrical systems. Our life-saving rule is clear. Do not work live. Do not work on any electrical system unless you are trained. By following this life-saving rule, we'll keep people safe. Competent electricians have to go through intensive training to make sure that they have the correct skills to manage the risk. The second area is not as obvious. It's often not as clear unless you're trained to identify the hazards. For example, when working at height on ladders, scaffolding or on a tower, we can get close to live electrical conductors and electrical systems, or when drilling into walls where cables may be present. We've said many times throughout this refresher training that we need to manage the risk. This means that we put in the right controls to stop us from working close to the systems where we can be seriously hurt. To help us understand what we can and cannot do, Nokia has developed a system that will help manage the risk. There are 4 clearly defined categories that state who can do what when working with electrical equipment. Category 1 is work that is limited to plugging equipment into or out of our racks, turning items of equipment on or off, or replacing items of equipment. These are typically electrical activities an unskilled or basic skill person would undertake in their own home. There must be no live working. Category 2 is where someone is permitted to complete minor electrical work and installations. Work is limited to adding to or repairing or replacement of existing electrical circuits. When this work is done, the correct tools and equipment must be used. As an example, using screwdrivers with tape around it is not a correct tool. The screwdriver should be properly insulated. Category 3A is where someone is going to work on high-capacity DC installation maintenance or testing of high-capacity DC systems over 50 amps. Only qualified registered electricians or equivalent who have the right level of competency can work on these systems. With this type of work, live working is often unavoidable. Controls must be in place. Disconnection of batteries require live working. Again, the correct insulated tools and equipment must be used. The final category is Cat 4. This is where work is often done on the design, installation and testing of circuits on both AC and DC systems with certification that the electrical installation is safe and compliant. It can only be done by qualified registered electricians or equivalent, using the right tools and equipment. There are various levels and types of shock that someone can receive. If the current is strong enough and it does not need to be much to do so, this can disrupt the beating of the heart. This is called fibrillation. When electricity goes through your body, it can also interfere with your grip, making it impossible to let go of the thing that you've touched. Indeed, direct current, DC, often wrongly considered completely safe, presents an increased risk of a person being unable to let go of the conductors or energized parts. When you receive an electric shock, it usually goes in through your hand and out through your toes. It finds its way back to earth. As it goes through your body, it cooks you from the inside out. Even if you survive an electric shock, you can have long-term effects such as burns, damage to the flesh, and damage to the nervous system or eyesight. We are now going to look at a couple of examples where it went wrong. In this example, a team were fault finding at a site when they realised that the power problem was not connected with the site itself. It was a problem at a distribution panel quite a distance away from the site. They went to the panel, found the door was unlocked and tried to reset the power. As soon as he did this, there was a massive explosion that threw the person many metres back onto the side of the car that he had been using. He died of his injuries. They were not trained in working with electricity. They were not authorised to access this panel. They did not understand the risk. One person lost his life because they did not follow Nokia's life-saving rules. Do not work live. Do not work on any electrical system unless you are trained. In this incident, an engineer was supervising some live electrical work in a data center. He decided that he would help the team by tightening a connection in the cabinet. He touched the exposed buzz bars at the back of the cabinet and there was a massive electrical arc that covered his whole body. He suffered electrical burns to his exposed skin from the flash. The engineer was not trained or competent to work in electrical systems. He should not have done what he had done. Nokia's non-negotiables had not been implemented. The team did not get agreement from the customer to isolate the panel they were working in. The engineer suffered electrical burns to his body because he did not follow Nokia's life-saving rule. Do not work live. Do not work in any electrical system unless you're trained. The team had not implemented Nokia's non-negotiables. So let's summarise. Nokia has in place standards which contain non-negotiables that, if we follow, will make sure everyone goes home safely at the end of the day. Our life-saving rules are 6 simple rules that will help save people's lives. We also must remember that we get it right more than we get it wrong, and with your help, we will continue to do that. There will be several questions that you have to answer and pass to get the L0 certificate. Thank you for completing this course.